before, in fact, I've of course got all the vetted questions and the nice and easy ones. So you, the audience, can ask the awkward questions. So you, of course, need to put your hand up, and there'll be a lovely roving mic coming out to you, name and company, and you can ask your question. So please, and with these things, what happens is you all save your questions to the last 5 minutes. We run out of time. So if you've got a question, please, can you ask it earlier? Because we can get things off. Thank you very much for both coming up on stage. We've now got 3 additional panelists. I'll just quickly get them to introduce themselves. I know their names are up there, but the pictures always look so young up there. So we'll start at the far end. Just quickly, name and company will be great, and what you do.
Aurel from Halo Dot.
Hi everyone, Giulio de Taddeo, Nexi Group.
And Boris Ferlet from Ingenico.
Wonderful. So as I said, I've got the listed questions, all approved, nice and easy. You do the awkward ones. So stick your hands up. I'm interested in actually just the panel's thoughts, because one of the big things I see with retailers, and it was interesting you said that survey, more than 100,000. I think the big question, is actually something slightly different, which is how many of those would be big retailers versus the small and the micro? Because I think we've got a big issue with legacy systems out there. And I'm just wondering how much these legacy systems are inhibiting the retailers. Because I think I got told it's about once every 5 years a retailer sort of upgrades their POS. You know, you're looking at me like, make it 10 now in the current economic climate. But, you know, it's not something they do every year, put it like that. Is that a big inhibitor? Where are we going? So is the growth going to come really from the bottom, not from the top? And please, so anyone can throw in a thought here. This is what I'm seeing in the market.
Certainly, legacy is a problem wherever you go. Deploying an app to the App Store takes minutes. It's really fast to do. But integrating that into an existing payment system so that the retailer can process it end to end is complex. And what we see with retailers is they've purchased their own switches. They refuse to leverage existing payment integrations, and they insist on using their own. So they'll sweat the small stuff by not paying an extra 0.225% on a transaction and undertake a whole big project. And that drags on for a year, 2 years before they actually get value out of the product that they're deploying.
Yeah, but let's say from our perspective, Nexi, let's say we are seeing that for sure merchants today are really focused in, as it has emerged before, in delivering the best user experience to the merchants, to the buyers, sorry. And if we have to resume, it's all about buyer experience. Today, merchants are competing really against each other in the competitive arena on the axis of delivering and how they deliver the best experience possible. So for sure, every organization has legacy systems, platforms in place, but we are seeing a lot of investments going in this direction in order to really decide first how and what to deliver to the buyers, and secondly, achieving that result. I would say in a design phase where the payment is really central in order to deliver what has been defined at strategic level by the merchant. That's really what we are seeing. So a lot of investments on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would add it's a topic that tend to see some disagreement on at times. I think an expectation that it is the smaller micro merchants that really, the sort of obvious user case. And actually, if you think about the big retailers, and you said about 5 years, I remember speaking to a retailer a couple of years ago. It's like, we're coming up to our 10-year. We need to start thinking about it.
5 years an average, isn't it?
I mean, it's so expensive. You know, people underestimate with big retailers, big footprints, how much money it is going to cost to go in again. And if you're doing it for another 10 years, it's right to go.
Have to make a decision that it's a long-term decision.
Am I going to do it? And actually, how do I want a consumer to walk around my retail footprint? And how much do I want to pay? You know, a square of retail space on Oxford Street is pretty damn expensive.
The other problem is they change staff so often. You've got the whole training. They've got to make it easy on them.
But the training's on the existing POS as well, right? It's just the device and the way in which you think about a POS and that experience versus, it being a set system you have to always go back to.
Yeah, but it's here we are not discussing about changing the whole infrastructure, all the devices for a retailer. They are designing new shop formats, And when you design a new format, as you said, you will redefine completely the checkout experience. You need to, because people are expecting this. And in this situation, it's up to us as vendors to come with a flexible architecture, API-based, in order to make it possible to introduce the service without the need to redesign the whole thing. Because, of course, redesigning the whole thing is just impossible in a...
How easy is it to integrate the new and the old together?
It's to the new generation of vendors to do the job, again, because...
You'd say easy?
Easy. Nothing is easy, but it's
getting easier.
It's not the same than replacing. Don't imagine this is about replacing 1,000 terminals with the central, server in order to do this. I mean, when you need to implement a new shop format from scratch, you are building a new system, in fact, by definition.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think if we look at what kind of retail expectations and intentions are, is bringing a lot more value to merchants and indirectly to consumers. And so the legacy is not just on the merchant side, it's all of the other players in the ecosystem, because payment players have legacy systems, vendors of solutions have legacy solutions, and really I think the solution is how, indeed, through maybe more modern technology, you can either abstract the old systems that cannot change right now, or provide the right solutions so that all of these systems can communicate. Otherwise, you're always kind of hindered by the last moving part, whether it's the retailer, the acquirer, and the other players in that chain. And I think technology now, maybe better openness from all the big players to outsourcing or moving to more modern technology should make things easier. But there is a legacy that we all have to live with.
And one trend that we are seeing in the market, for example, is about how ergonomic are the platforms and the service that we as payment operators are building. And we find very, let's say, good market returns from the capability also that we put in place in order to, for example, build specific software, piece of software to ease up the integration for merchants. That's something that I see as a trend in the market.
But you see, if I take a sample of one, okay, important one, me. My local beekeeping division, we've just started taking cards. And we've done it because it's now so much easier using soft POS. Okay, and I'm wondering how much this new technology, particularly soft POS, and Barclaycard, you're a big traditional acquirer with terminals and rentals, and you've got a lot of stuff out there.
All in that now.
Yeah. How much are we actually going to see this new stuff, actually what I would call expand out the card acceptance I don't want to call it card acceptance network, but the amount of people just, I have plumbers come to me, I'll be honest with you, and I say to you guys, yeah, but the thing never pairs. I gave up on it. And I'm wondering what we're seeing now is how actually going to expand out really easily the actual market opportunity. And I'd love to get your views on that, because my personal one is I think that's where the huge growth is going to come from, is actually the number of people just accepting this type of payment.
Yeah, I think most of the technology at the moment does integrate really well into the existing platforms. And actually, most scale processing providers have either already recent years or will have to, dare I say it, upgrade some of the legacy platforms. So, we've been processing payments for over 50 years, and in the last 5 years, we've had to rip out the beating heart and put a new one in to be ready for some of the new technology and to be able to interface. So I think the reality is, unless as a scale processor you're prepared to make those advances and to accept things into the ecosystem, then, it's a bit of a code-out moment. Is
it going to be new distribution channels? Because I got mine from my B Society from a company I'd never heard of before, and I asked a friend here doing soft POS, I said, right, who do I go and talk to? He said, go and talk to that one. I'd never heard of them.
Yeah, and I think some of that will be scale providers working with partners to make sure that you're providing the right solution. That doesn't necessarily always have to be white label. You don't have to use the brands. As long as you've got access to the same ecosystems, I think that works as well.
Yeah, I do really believe, let's say, that the innovation, at the end of the day, we put services and products out there. We support merchants in a consultative manner in order to make them thrive and win in the competitive arena. But at the end of the day, we are not sure, let's say, where, for example, soft POS will be successful or not. In this moment, it's probably a great tool that we give to merchants that can use as a toolbox, as a new device in order to deliver the experience that they have decided to deliver. And we do think, for example, we're launching in Europe the product, that it will be positively integrated in the ecosystem. But at the same time, there are, let's say, all niches or particular use cases where do we see some time for, let's say, for yet some other time, the usage of the standard POS or the smart POS as a, let's say, a good fit for the need, the business need, and the buyer need that merchants have to serve. Think about, for example, quick cash lines in the supermarkets, or value-added services that today are present and processed in the POS device. And soft POS will get traction, will get there, but it will get a bit of time.
And I think certainly what reality we're seeing in the market is merchants would usually tend to pick a business solution before they choose payments. And so they'll look at something that is designed for their specific vertical, whether it's beekeeping or a bar or whatever else, and then work with a payment solution that is in line with their needs and works with that. And I think to your point, Houssem, about the integration. So I think what we're seeing in some markets where increasingly ISVs are becoming the primary channel or becoming a fast-growing channel to merchants for enablement payment solutions. I think SoftPOS makes this maybe even easier now because it's designed for the cloud, it's designed for integration with tablets, so definitely helping them. Whether that's going to possibly be mainstream or for niche, top retail, very occasional merchants, I think market will show as we move on. But there's definitely, I think, a trend for SoftPOS to becoming an enablement for some of these
It's interesting you talk about it as an enablement, so maybe that leads me on to my next question, which is how much, we saw in COVID a huge drive to online. No arguments there. That's hurt bricks and mortar retail. And okay, some are starting to say, well, you can drop it back and pick up from us and stuff. But how can actually changing the checkout experience drive people, I think, back into the retail environment? Because, queuing, whilst the British like it, most of Europe don't. We're experts at queuing. Most of Europe looks at the queue and says, 3 people? No, I'm not going anywhere near that. British look at queue and go, hey, there's not enough people there. They're not popular. I'm just interested in how the change in the retail checkout process could actually really reinvigorate and drive people back into the store. I'm interested in some thoughts on that, maybe.
Well, I have a strong thought. Our view is that, so we are, of course, a provider of in-store mobility payment acceptance solutions. And what we see is that commerce experiences in in-store have been far less sophisticated than online, at least in the richness of the shopping experience or I'd say the breadth of services made available to consumers. And what we would like to do is ensure that in the end, consumers can have the same type of engagement as they have online. No one can really understand why the same payment methods, services, loyalty, recognition you have when you shop online are not available in store. I think that's one way, David, to basically align consumer intents, experiences, will drive better conversion and I'd say retention of clients in store.
I think what SoftPOS does as well is it gives typically e-commerce retailers the ability to do in-store payments as well, which they wouldn't have done before. So if you're selling T-shirts online, you can now go to a festival and sell your goods physically, which they could never do before. So
and integrated to the same back end?
To the same platform. So you can switch those merchant details. So obviously the one's card present, the other's card not present, but SoftPOS, solves for that.
I do think, just to add to that, it's a really interesting point because one of the things I think the entire industry is still grappling with is online and in-store. Like, there really is no boundaries. And even if you just think about the way in which the traditional rails behave and act, and the way, consumers expect them to behave and act, they don't quite meet in the middle yet. So
that's why I was asking
really
that simple question.
Yeah,
because
the evolution of the way in which the experience is governed, managed, and the sort of networks around that, I think would be really interesting.
Yeah, this is interesting because in reality, buyers thinking in terms of brands and not in terms of channels. That was probably early 2000. Today, they are thinking about, let's say, the merchant brand from which they are buying. And so we have to support them. And again,
I expect the same receipt from both through my email if you've got it. Not different. Absolutely. Gentleman over there, question, please. Then we'll come to the gentleman at the back. Name and company first, please. Yeah, you're on.
Okay, Eric, I'm from Rema 1000, Reitan. We are present in 7 markets across the Nordics, so around 3,500 shops. And in my head, there's no doubt. There's a no-brainer. We will go for SoftPOS. We will roll it out in self-checkout, in EV charging, and all of that stuff. And it will happen because of the cost, because we are in a margin squeeze with the current inflation, all of that. So in my head, this is a no-brainer. It will happen. We need to sort out some regulatory stuff about certification, that stuff. But I still feel, this is a bit of yesterday's news. This is already last year. Because we are, what's important to us is early identification, it's loyalty, it's cheap transactions to take control of the payment in our store, the communication with our users. So we are already, and that happens for all the large retailers across our region, that we start to take payment into our app. We're already moving into in-app payment combined with loyalty, early identification, communication with the customer through the journey. So don't you feel that what we discussed here for the UK is already a bit yesterday's news?
Is it yesterday's news? Oh, some retailers. Right, panel, I give you that. While the mic goes to the back, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first. Yeah, I think it is a little bit yesterday's news. I agree with that. And if only I had my crystal ball. But I think what isn't clear at the moment is the mass scale adoption across the entire region. So I think, and I spend time with retail. I spent most of my professional career speaking with retailers, and there is still battles and dilemmas as to how to get to full adoption and how to move that and how to shift consumers. So whilst I agree it's yesterday's news, I guess part of our job in the payment space is to get to scale adoption. I don't think we're quite there yet. And I think what's really interesting is the reason sometimes you get scale adoption is because you look at what is coming next and how this gets you as a building block to that. So I talked about contactless and wallets, and now to soft POS, you can see the building blocks. So what I think is interesting and what will come tomorrow, and maybe none of us are really clear on yet, is what is that next tomorrow that makes this the reason that you scale adopt.
Yeah, and one important point, because I believe that Eric has a deep knowledge in the Nordic countries, this is a new tool, in terms of accepting payments, and it will take a bit of time depending on the countries and geographies. Why is that? Because, for example, the more south you go, something that is normal, for example, for Nordics countries, that is sealess payments. In reality, the more south you go, the more inserting the card in the old way is still present. Germany, Italy, and other countries are around 35-40% of the digital payments that have happened inserting the card. So also a product in where I think that all the panel believes in, that is the soft POS, will take a bit of time, because Europe is
So you're saying basically the Nordics are ahead of the game and most of us are catching up?
Catching up? No, they are adopting. The payment methods are a matter of habit at the end of the day. When a payment method or a tool gets traction in the market, two ways. First, and this is really first because it's more important, solves a buyer problem. Secondly, a merchant need. When we get that, the payment method or the payment acceptance will be successful.
Question at the back there, please. Name and company, and then we'll move to the other side.
Yes, Andres Vinakovs, Every. I had to rethink my question twice because it was kind of answered the original one. So Houssem mentioned in his presentation that one of the delivery model they're seeing for the soft POS is SaaS. So basically, the vendor will be hosting the backend, which is effectively adding additional cost layer to every transaction. So you'll have your acquirer fees, you'll have. So
you're saying it's adding an extra layer of cost. Is that your concern?
Yes, it will be extra layer of cost. So, and I was speaking to a number of retailers yesterday, and everyone is complaining about the thin margins and how tight they have to squeeze their acquirers to get info out of them and to understand whether they are charged properly, correctly, and are not overcharged. So might this be one of the things which, if not given significant value, or not given the business case, will not just prevent the technology from evolving?
Yeah, I'll take a first step. Yeah, I think it is a concern. And actually, not even just with this technological advance, but pretty much any of them, the question that you always get from retailers is, well, how does that affect my margins and my cost? And rightly so. So I think it comes back to, and this is maybe where the scale adoption piece comes, because it's about finding the right balance and business case, which is why, I think looking end to end on what technology delivers as a customer experience and then where the upside is the most important part of that discussion. So a retailer that I was talking to a few years ago about the concept of soft POS was genuinely considering not spending millions on implementing hardware across the store. And I know you talked about having a mix and match, but actually they were going, I want to rip this stuff out. It costs me a lot of money to buy and to maintain, and is this an alternate solution for me to do it? Now, they didn't make the jump at that point. We went into a global pandemic, so it was tricky. But, I still think that the concept is the same. You have to find those levers, and that's when you get to scale adoption, back to the previous question. So you're right, the margins and layering on cost, whether it's, soft POS, orchestration layers, any other payment layers, you've got the core bones and you either bypass those or you have to find a business case to absorb them.
Yeah. And it's you have to rebuild the whole business case, not considering as adding layers, because the business case is about revenues and costs. Okay, so revenues first of all, and this is related to the other question. We will create new opportunities for consumers to come back to shops, to spend their money and to buy. Okay, because they will have a good experience, have a salesperson advising them and pushing them, to buy and to finalize. So first of course, the business case, the positive aspect of the business case are more revenues first. Second, it's not adding a layer, it's redesigning a system. So you will get rid of part of your costs related to hardware, logistics, and the related, personnel costs, etc. And totally replacing this by a much more flexible SaaS-based solution, which is much cheaper than a proprietary in-house on-premise solution. So you have not to consider this as adding layers, but redesigning the business case.
Exactly right. And I think if you divorce the commercials from the technology, yes, there's an extra technology layer potentially, but it doesn't mean it's always an extra cost. You're eliminating a lot of other existing terminal costs, terminal management systems, and all of that comes at great expense for the technical teams that administer that typically on-premise. So software as a service generally has taken over the world as a business model. Why? Because you don't need technical teams supporting it. So it takes away a lot of the pain of maintaining systems, which I think is priced into the solution, and it's definitely value that's being delivered.
Question over there, please. Could we have your name and company, please?
Damon McCree, American Express. I'm interested in the panel's views on whether you've seen or you expect to see the use of soft POS to complete an e-com transaction. So if you're, say, at home, you're on a website, you fill out your basket, and when you come to pay, you actually complete the payment on your own device.
Yeah. So that technology is called tap on own device. It's been a hot topic for a long time with the card schemes. It hasn't typically been supported, but I think we are seeing some adoption of that now and support behind it. Essentially, there's no difference between the software that runs on a merchant device versus a consumer device. It's the same software. It's just the concept of what rate should be applied to that e-commerce transaction, because it's now a card present. So it's been more debate around fees than the actual technology. In terms of adoption, I think as hard as it is to educate merchants about tap on phone, it's going to be a tougher challenge educating consumers. So you really have to know what you're doing in terms of creating that fantastic user experience.
You mean consumers would be reticent to tack on their own phone or tap on at a market store someone else's phone?
I believe they would be more comfortable tapping on their own phone and typing a PIN on their own device rather than a stranger's device.
I thought that as well. But when I did my B stall, trust me, hand over the phone, tap, tap, tap. I couldn't believe how people were happy to tap.
I think that comes back to the continuation of technology because, when we first had contactless, and we were talking about this earlier, one of the environments where consumers actually most used their first tap was in an unattended payment environment because nobody was watching. I was in a queue and I was going to do this weird thing where it was wrong. But because we're talking about technology, which is just on this continuation of I've got used to as a consumer doing that, I actually think it's easier.
Last year's show, I had an argument with a friend doing MPOS saying, but biggest issue is going to be people are not going to want to tap on my phone. He said, try it. He did, and he blew me away. Maybe that's the English for you. I don't know.
If there's a convenience for the buyer, we admitted that schemes rules can allow that. Then it will be experimented. At the end of the day, it will be the buyer that will decide what kind of technology and more specifically, what kind of user experience they wanna get. If there are, I don't know, particularly conscious buyers out there, it will become mainstream for sure.
Okay, because I'm conscious of time here. I do want to do a small amount. I don't want to call it crystal ball thinking because anyone can dream 5 years, but you talked about, looking ahead and stuff. And so I'm going to say over the next 18, 24 months. So, what I consider to be, if at the next conference we're not talking about, well, this is actually coming, we should be, okay? Over the next 18, 24 months, what do we see as the biggest change in technology or payment solution that merchants are actually going to be adopting? And how's it going to be feeding through? Is it going to be a soft POS actually? Am I going to be going into my sort of paper chase if it was still there and actually having soft POS? Or is that still, I'm 5 years away from that? I'm just thinking, what's the real changes we're going to be seeing, do you think, at the merchant level over the next 18, 24 months? And I'll start from the end and come down this way.
I think if you look at what Amazon have done with Amazon Go, I think to me that's going to be the biggest change that we'll see in retail environments where it's actually completely invisible. You walk into a store, you don't do anything. You lift the goods off the shelf and you walk out. I think that in 24 months is going to be in more countries and sort of where we are today with POS, with soft POS. It's really been in a pilot phase. I think in 24 months you'll start seeing that sort of payment, invisible payment method being deployed into stores where it's literally walk in, walk out, and biometrics is your payment mechanism with whatever your preferred payment is in the background, whether it's an account
next 24 months.
Debit. Yeah.
18, 20, okay, that's going to be an interesting one to come back and measure that because I still think that's a bit further out. But anyway.
2 predictions, so maybe one would be right. The first one is personal experiences, not anymore just the user experience, but your fully customized user experience, basically leveraging payment and other source data. And 2, account-to-account payments outside, I would say, UK and Nordics, because we are seeing a Nexi really nice ramp up.
I was going to come on to that, but we ran out of time. Account-to-account, I think it's a fair, interesting one.
No, I think definitely soft POS as a way to extend acceptance and improve acceptance on the top of, I say, more traditional payment methods and all of the unattended ones and mobility. I think that's technology is there, players are there, so that's definitely going to generalize. I think the second one is really maybe to bounce back on what Giulio was saying, more personalized shopping experiences in store in a similar sense to what you have online. Maybe not mainstream yet, but technology is there to recognize you, provide digital receipts automatically, decide on what services are prompted to you depending on kind of the vertical segment you are shopping in. And lastly, providing merchants of all sizes, including the small ones, more insight based on data for them to manage their business better. And if I put it simpler, it's increasingly providing tools to small merchants that were until now only available to the very big enterprise retailers or organized retail. But with the cloud, with SaaS, these services are increasingly being available for small merchants.
So I think I've covered some of this, but I think the personalization piece is really important. But it's not just about personalization of commerce. And I do think, we talk about the core payment piece is just moving some money from here to here in some description or a value, right? I mean, future, let's wonder what data might be. Could that be a currency of its very own? But I think, moving of payment is the commerce that sits around it that needs to be really well personalized. And that's how consumers, I think, engage when they are making a purchase. But where I think it's going to get really interesting, maybe controversially, it's not really about one piece of technology. I think where the real game is at is how to connect the dots. And actually that is about the personalization, but it's about how do I get the benefit of lots of different pieces of technology in one seamless way. Retailers are battling all the time with how to integrate different pieces of technology and kit. So I actually think the real game in town is the organizations that string those things together.
Okay, so I will maybe have 2 predictions. The first one regarding the, let's say, retail shops. Yeah, we'll have as a consumer a more pleasant, let's say, experience regarding checkout and payment.
We like queuing.
Yeah,
English.
Yeah, but we are French. When you start queuing, it's a mess, so you don't have to. So yeah, no. But apart from this, yeah, I think we will have a really more pleasant experience having personnel in shops helping us, and not just asking us to go there and queue for an hour to pay. So I think it's more pleasant. And maybe we did not discuss this really, but in emerging countries, this will be a huge change in terms of financial inclusion of small merchants. Think about Brazil, for example, a country where we are operating. You have millions of merchants waiting for such solutions to be really, to improve their business on a daily basis. So this will be a huge change within the 2 coming years. I think.
Thank you for a great panel. I think our audience, we need to thank them as well. But before we all disappear, I'm chairing 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, so don't party too hard at the gala tonight. So I hopefully track 2 tomorrow. If you enjoyed this one, come and hear me tomorrow morning. I've got another great panel then. So do have fun tonight, but do come and join me tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., please. I'd like to have someone with me. But thank you very much for a great panel. Thank you.